We are officially less than 2 weeks away from the biggest MMA fight of the year as Ilia Topuria takes on Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight title at UFC 317. In this video, I'm going to be doing a full breakdown of this matchup, talking about both guys' styles, covering some of the biggest factors that I think are going to be at play in this fight, and then dropping my prediction, my winner pick at the end, and how I think they get it done. Would love to hear your thoughts. Drop your prediction in the comments. If you enjoy the video, hit the like button and subscribe. But let's just dive right into these guys' styles. And I'm going to start off with Ilia Topuria. Even though he's the guy moving up, Oliveira was the former lightweight champion, it does seem like he's carrying a little bit more momentum into this matchup. Starting off with his measurables, 5'7" with a 69-inch reach, 28 years old, obviously just super young in his career to already be at this point, having multiple title wins at 145, now going for the opportunity to, win a belt in a second weight class. He is going to be a little bit undersized. He was honestly already kind of undersized at 145. Not that he's not built like a tank, but just in terms of his frame, was already on like the shorter, stockier side of featherweight. I think there is going to be a noticeable kind of size and frame difference between Ilia and Charles Oliveira. Ilia is an orthodox fighter. He has a very low bladed stance, so he is not showing a ton of his weapons. He's pretty tough to hit clean. He really gets into his legs, which helps, him kind of explode. I think he kind of is like a perfect example of someone who's able to maximize his physical build. He doesn't have a crazy long reach, but he does have decent long arms for his height. And he doesn't have a huge torso, so when he gets in like that lower stance, he's really able to effectively block a ton of the stuff that's coming at him. And we've seen it's very, very tough to hit him clean. He's also constantly moving his head. He's never just sitting there in terms of his head as like a stationary target. Now, we have seen guys kind of be able to pick at him, land some jabs, land some kicks in his fights against Volk and Holloway, excluding the rounds where he clipped those guys and finished them. Like, he's been in some competitive rounds. I want to say Volk won the first round in their matchup. Like, rounds 1 and 2 against Holloway were very, very competitive. So you can potentially like edge out rounds against him, have some 50-50 rounds, but it is going to be really tough to land anything with like fight-ending consequences. And that's kind of a problem when on the other side, Ilia can just throw absolute heat and can finish you with literally any punch. And that is what we'll talk about next here. Ilia truly has top tier power. He had it at 145. We've seen it up at 155 in one matchup against Jai Herbert, but I'm kind of already willing to say that I feel like amongst the active 155ers, I do think he's probably the hardest hitter. He throws so well in combination. He's able to explode into range and is able to like extend these combos with like 4, 5, 6 shots. And pretty much every single shot within that combination like has fight ending upside, which is something you just don't see from a lot of dudes. He has a really powerful overhand right. His left hook is nasty. We saw him finish Max Holloway with that. Also has a very solid jab. And then he also works the body really well. First in just like landing those shots to the body, whether it's straights or, his lead left hook, but also, setting up that body shot to then follow up with the overhand like we've seen in some of his finishes. I've just recorded some of the, fight-ending combos he's had in his UFC career. For Volk, it was the right body hook into the lead hook, overhand right, and then he lined up Volk to land another overhand that really put him out. Against Bryce Mitchell, it was an uppercut into a lead left hook, overhand right to follow. That rocked him, set up the submission. Damon Jackson, uppercut, body shot, lead hook, overhand right. Jai Herbert, jab, overhand, ripped to the body with a huge shot, and then followed it up with an overhand that just, put Jai Herbert out cold. And one thing you do notice in a lot of these fight-ending sequences, you do not want to be up against the cage when you are fighting Ilia Topuria. When he can line you up and you can't retreat backwards and he can just rip those monster shots, you're in serious, serious damage if he can back you up against the cage. And then I guess one kind of unique characteristic of Ilia's style that I don't think a lot of people would get taught to do is that typically, right, when someone's teaching you striking, when you're stepping forward, you want to step with your lead foot. When you're moving backwards, your first step, you want that to be your back foot. Ilia does a unique thing where sometimes when he's moving forward, he will actually step first with his back foot, which allows him to close a little bit of distance so he can explode even farther when he does jump into range with those combinations. Just another way of him kind of using his frame and his strengths and having like, a unique kind of setup that you don't see a lot of dudes go with. He also has great cage control. You never really see Ilia get backed, back on the fence. You don't really see people pressuring Ilia backwards. Typically, he's the guy that's like hunting people. He never really looks like the prey in there, and he never really gets put in weird spots unless he's like somehow overthrowing. Like I know in the Bryce Mitchell fight, he backed Bryce Mitchell up into the cage, overthrew, and then all of a sudden his back is to the fence. But it's never really him getting just straight up pressured and pushed backwards. He's not going to throw a ton of kicks, but when he does, they're going to be super heavy low kicks. He really doesn't throw anything like above the waist, but when he does land those low kicks, like he can take dudes off their feet, and you can tell it bothers dudes. He landed some heavy ones against Bryce Mitchell, Volkanovski, Max Holloway. It's a very solid weapon, even though he doesn't throw it a ton. He also just has super clean footwork, also constantly feigning. A lot of these things just make him really tough to line up. His stance, his footwork, the fact that he's always moving his head, he's always making you think about things. He's honestly just a super, super fun fighter to watch. And then when we're looking at his grappling here, he has shown some really, really solid takedown defense so far in the UFC, 92%. He's only been taken down a single time in the UFC, and that was against Bryce Mitchell. He's actually been, pretty striking heavy in the UFC. I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that his first 7 pro wins were by submission. So I want to say he actually has more submission wins in his career than he has knockouts, and like a wide variety of submissions. All pre-UFC, he had a triangle choke, 2 rear naked chokes, a guillotine, a mounted guillotine, anaconda, triangle armbar, and then in the UFC, he had that arm triangle against Bryce Mitchell. So even though he doesn't show it a ton, you can't sleep on his grappling and his submission offense. Not sure that's going to play a huge role offensively in this fight, but just got to mention it for his skill set. Now looking at Charles Oliveira, going to be the bigger guy just in terms of his frame, 5'10" with a 74-inch reach, is 7 years older than Ilia at 35 years old. And I think Oliveira's kind of put out a couple different forms in his last like 6-7 fights since he's really been getting into like these high profile, title matchups, number one contender fights. I think Charles Oliveira is at his best when he is pressing forward. He's mixing things up. He's working the body with his front kicks, his knees. He's looking for the clinch, landing those uppercuts, knees, just trying to like force grappling exchanges, making dudes uncomfortable. When he's able to just mix all 3 levels, go into the head, body, and the legs. We know he's powerful, right? Sat Justin Gaethje down. Gaethje said he's the hardest dude, he's ever taken a shot from. And I just think he is at his best when he's able to overwhelm dudes with pace, even against Dustin Poirier, right? Like Poirier had a very solid round 1, but he was putting a pace on him. Dustin never had an opportunity to breathe, and it did seem like he was starting to fade, getting into the second round, into the third, where Charles Oliveira was able to find that finish. Now, that style is not, without its faults. He's kill or be killed when he goes out like that. He was hurt by Gaethje. He was hurt by Poirier, but I do think it's when he's at his most dangerous, and I'll get into this a little bit later on, but I do think it's probably his best path to win in this matchup against Ilia. We all know he has elite offensive jiu-jitsu. He is first in the UFC in finishes and submissions. Just in the UFC alone, he has submission wins by rear naked choke, guillotine, anaconda, darce, triangle, calf slicer, and armbar. So pretty much like every submission across the board. Charles Oliveira is capable of it and is very dangerous in pretty much every position. He's not a grappler who's going to go out there and like be super wrestle heavy and try to like double leg you and take you down like that. Typically, especially against like, the higher quality competition, he wants to work in the clinch, kind of tie guys up, just get into like these weird entanglements, try to trip legs, work his way to the back like we saw against Dustin Poirier. But he's not going to go out there and, blow by you with his wrestling like an all-American wrestler or something. More of like a unique kind of jiu-jitsu grappling style approach. Looking at some of his deficiencies here, he is pretty hittable on the feet, and he has been a little bit chinny. He has a very unique chin where you can rock him and hurt him. Like, it's not like he has an iron jaw where he's never going to go down, but he has shown some really solid recoverability where you can clip him, he'll go to his back, he'll hang out because he's fine if you join his guard, and then he'll be able to get up and collect himself. Like, got put down a couple times by Gaethje, Poirier hurt him, and he was able to bounce back just fine. But like, he was hurt in 4 consecutive title fights against Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and Islam Makhachev, and 3 of those were in the first round, the first 3 excluding the Islam Makhachev fight, where he dropped him in the second. And then the thing I kind of mentioned where you kind of get 2 different Charles Oliveira's, he hasn't looked quite as dangerous against competent grapplers. So I'm looking at guys like Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan. Now, you could also just make the case that like those are the two best dudes he's fought in this recent run, and so it's reasonable he doesn't look as great. But I think the biggest factor in those matchups is just that they don't fear his guard, and so he doesn't get these opportunities to rest, or where he gets stung, he can't just lay on his back and Poirier or Gaethje or like Chandler are going to separate and just like let him back up and give him time to recover. He's not able to rest in those areas. And also, like, they're not as scared of his grappling, whereas a guy like Poirier, Gaethje, like, they're doing everything in their power to not get taken down, not get controlled, not get clinched by Charles Oliveira. And so I do think that's an interesting matchup here with Ilia Topuria, who I do think is a better grappler than some of those other dudes that have been pretty scared of him. Now let's talk about just some of the biggest factors I think are going to be at play in this matchup. And the first one is just going to be Charles Oliveira's strategy. I think for Ilia, we kind of know what to expect. He comes in with a pretty consistent game plan. He's going to go out there and execute what he does best. For Charles Oliveira, I think he needs to come in here and be aggressive. I think he needs to put Ilia on the back foot. He needs to apply pressure. Now, not in a super reckless way, because obviously that's very dangerous, but you can, kind of safely apply pressure. But I think he just needs to try to push Ilia back, land some jabs, front kicks, try to just like overwhelm him with volume. We saw Max Holloway and even Volk a little bit have some success in those early rounds, just jabbing at him, kind of picking at him while Ilia tries to land the big shots. I think he should be trying to get into the clinch, landing his elbows, landing his knees. You just can't let Ilia settle in and dictate the pace of the fight, because he's going to win that fight, right? If they're going big shot for big shot, Ilia is going to beat every single dude in the world, in these weight classes, featherweight or lightweight. And part of applying the pressure is just like avoiding Ilia Topuria being able to push him against the cage, kind of line him up and wing these huge combinations against him. And like pressuring Ilia is dangerous. He can still land a big shot with Charles Oliveira coming in, but I do think it's his best chance, because if Oliveira tries to come out and be, super precise and super patient, I just don't think that's his strategy. I think Oliveira's upside is he's super dangerous. He can hit hard. If things get chaotic, he has submission upside. I don't think he has like the polish and the technique of a guy like Volk or even Holloway, who were having some success, but still those guys still got caught and finished in the second and third round. Then looking at the grappling here and just how I think like the grappling, situations are going to play out, I don't really expect Ilia Topuria to be super afraid of Oliveira's guard. Now, I'm not saying he's going to come out and like wrestle offensively and try to go in there and submit Charles Oliveira, but like if he hurts Charles, I don't think he's going to pull the Gaethje or Poirier and just get up and be like, I want no part of this. Like, I think he'll be fine going into the guard if he has Oliveira hurt. And then we have just seen like Ilia Topuria's takedown defense has been very good. He sprawls very well. Even though he's coming up, I still think he's going to be potentially like still physically the stronger dude in this matchup. You look at the way he just like manhandled Bryce Mitchell in some of those grappling exchanges. I don't expect Ilia to be overpowered by Charles Oliveira. And so I'm not really expecting Oliveira to have a ton of success there. Obviously, if he can get to those spots, it would be amazing. I just don't really have a ton of confidence with it. And then I honestly think just like the biggest deciding factor for me is the power of Ilia Topuria compared to the defense of Charles Oliveira. We have seen Oliveira get hurt by less powerful, less measured strikers so far throughout his career. And Ilia, on the other hand, has found ways to land these huge, massive shots on like all-time great strikers in Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. And I know we've seen Oliveira get hurt, be resilient, recover. You just don't really see guys recover against Ilia Topuria. A dude like Max Holloway never had been knocked out in his career, and Ilia hurts him badly on the feet. Maybe Max starts to recover, but then Ilia lands another massive shot in that left hook, and Max Holloway gets finished for the first time in his career. So my prediction, I think it's going to be a very fun fight. I think you have two elite fighters. Both guys are very dangerous. I just think Ilia Topuria is the better dude. He's so well-rounded. I don't see Charles coming in, being able to just ragdoll him on the ground. I think Ilia is the far more precise striker. I think he's safer, and I think he has more finishing upside. I think there's a strong case that Ilia Topuria is the best striker in the UFC, and he just has that fight-changing power where you can be fighting a great fight. You can be competitive, but if you're not getting him out of there and you're just having these 50-50 rounds, it seems almost inevitable that eventually he is going to land that massive shot that changes, just the entire fight, and he's able to win in that way. And so I think Ilia Topuria is going to knock out Charles Oliveira. I could see it happening, early. I am going to go with a round 1 knockout. Now, I would not be shocked if, he has some success in round 1, maybe finds the finish round 2 or round 3, like he did against Volk and then against Max Holloway. But we've also seen Charles come out hot, get clipped early on, like against Dustin, like against Chandler, like against Gaethje. And if he gets hit like he did against those guys, I don't think he's going to survive Ilia, just the initial shot and then some of the follow-up opportunities that Ilia Topuria will have. So I'm going with Ilia Topuria round 1 knockout. I'm super pumped for this fight. 2 great fighters, but I do think Ilia gets it done. But let me hear your thoughts down below. Do you agree with my prediction? Do you disagree? Drop it in the comments. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.